Now I'm going to skip the usual intro because today I'm actually going to do something a little bit different. I'm not going to be painting anything. So, how I paint things, you might consider this one instead how I rate things. Now somebody asked me recently which companies I like to go for 15mm troops. This came up in a thread on one of the bolt action groups I belong to, because people were talking about playing the game in a smaller scale. And with the cost of these 15mm troopers being fairly similar to one another, but you do get a lot more than you would for the larger 28mm figures, I figured it might be worth having a quick look at, the pros and cons of each and sort of what I like to use. So I've got here, these are the Plastic Soldier Company US Infantry. I painted those in the last couple of videos. And I've got here, these are from Wargames Factory, these Germans. They now sold through Dreamforge, I believe. I'll need to double check that. But they're a company, they do very, very cheap sort of versions. But we'll have a look at those first because they're actually not that bad. And then one that I haven't got a box for to show you is the guys Battlefront, who do Flames of War themselves. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to them. So first up, we're going to look at the Wargames Factory. These are the late war Germans. Now these guys, they come 84 in a box, and these cost me £12. That's roughly $15 US. If we get up real close, you can see the detail on them is actually pretty good. These guys, once I can hold my hand still, these guys have a fair bit of detail. They've actually got sort of folds and creases in their tunics. But if I just put that sheet down for a second, now if we get in real close, you can see that some of them have actually got these scopes on their rifles. And there's not a lot of variation in the poses. Like there's 6 scoped rifle blokes who are pointing off into the distance and shooting. Same too, there's, all of these riflemen are fairly similar to one another. And there is a really high proportion of MP40s in this kit. It's cool that they do come with officers, and there's a MG42 team with each of these sprues. You get 4 of these. But as far as sort of variety, there isn't a huge amount. You've got squads that are going to be made up of guys looking like this. One of the downsides to this kit for me is the fact that for a late war German force, there are no SDG assault rifles on it. So you're restricted to normal rifles, and that's about it. The inclusion of there are 2 MG34s is quite nice. So if you are looking at playing bolt action at these scales, this is, you're not going to get any assault rifles. Cool inclusion is the fact that on these Wargames Factory sprues, you do get a couple of Panzerfaust, and there's a Panzerschreck lurking around here somewhere as well. So for options, it's a pretty cool kit. Oh, there is a mortar too. So you've got yourself mortar, Panzerschreck, Panzerfausts, a bunch of MP40s. There are support weapons. The only real downside with these guys, I would say, is that the poses are fairly limited, and you've got a very high preponderance of MP40s, but you could do what you like to fix that. At $15 for 84 blokes, this is a pretty good set. I particularly like the detail on these guys. Like, for the fact that they aren't very big and there's not a lot of variety, they're still quite good looking models. So let's get straight on. Let's have a look at the Plastic Soldier Company US Infantry. Let's just get that. Now these are the Plastic Soldier Company US Infantry. The real kicker for these guys, for me, is the fact they need assembly. These are 15mm troops, and a lot of them have separate arms. It's cool because it gives you BARs, Thompsons, M1 carbines and stuff as well. But it does mean with that these filly little blokes, you are spending some time cleaning up and gluing arms on, particularly having to clean up around elbows and stuff where you clip the parts off. Now these likewise, they have a fairly decent range of accessories. You've got a bazooka team. There is a sniper team there too. The difference between these and the Wargames Factory kits is that the detail on them is a little bit more shallow, I think. So depending on how you're painting them, will change sort of how they're going to look. And with these guys, Plastic Soldier Company sells them in 2 separate boxes. You've got both the infantry, and then you've got late war heavy weapons box as well. And that's got more things like machine gun teams and so forth. So ideally, if you're looking at getting these guys, they're going to set you back a little bit more because you're going to want the other box as well. It's got officers and stuff like that in it too. I mean, painting-wise, you could paint up one of these guys, you know, like a radio operator or something, count them as an officer or what have you. But, you know, it's much of a much. It's really down to how you want to represent your officers. There's a fairly broad variety of poses on these guys too. You know, I quite like that on this kit. You do get some duplicates, but the ability to swap the arms around a little and get some variation that way, that's kind of cool. So these guys cost a little bit more. I think these cost me about $20. So you're going to end up paying, you know, roughly $45 to $50 by the time you include shipping if you're going to order them online. But these guys are quite a handy way. I would probably look at doing a company with these guys. The differences between these and most of the other figures, though, is if you look at the bases, they have these long lozenge-shaped bases under the guys, rather than the little round ones that fit on the sort of Flames of War style bases. These would still fit on those bases, but they're not going to fit any that have the recessed holes for those those figures to fit into. So they're pretty cool. I quite like these guys. I didn't think I did at first, but as I was weighing up the pros and cons, you know, these Plastic Soldier Company, these late war US infantry, these guys are pretty cool. I've seen good things about their Germans and their Russians as well. This is just what I have. Then finally, I've got these guys from Battlefront. But as you see, these guys being in metal, they're a little bit chunkier. They've definitely got much more pronounced details to them. And they're a little bit more cartoonish in their proportions in order that they can be cast more easily in the metal. Now, I quite like these guys. I personally like that chunky look. The problem with these, well, it's not really a problem with Battlefront stuff itself, but these will not mix terribly well with the likes of the Plastic Soldier Company's ones. They're a lot chunkier. These Plastic Soldier Company, they're quite tall and thin, whereas these guys, like I said, a little bit more cartoonish proportion. So you gotta weigh up the odds there. Now their plastics that Battlefront do are styled to quite closely match their metal stuff, so that the whole range, you know, looks reasonable together. So they do cost a little bit more. I actually forget how much I paid. This was a whole Weapons Company blister. But that's kind of a bonus too with Battlefront. Like, specifically if you're looking at playing a game like Bolt Action in 15mm where you don't need a whole company, you only need like a platoon, the ability to pick up these small platoon blisters, sort of a la carte, that can be quite cool, I think. The officers in these sets are represented very well. Like, they're very clearly officers. They have got pistols. You might want them with rifles, but you know, these guys definitely look to business. The other weapons are all quite well represented, and the main difference between that and the others is rifles aren't going to snap. You know, some of these really little plastic ones, like the carbines on these Plastic Soldier Company, I am concerned by how small they are. But on the Battlefront miniatures, these are sturdy as, you know, they're metal. They're small metal things, and they don't protrude very far from their models, so they're unlikely to snap. Now, like I said, they do plastics for these ranges as well, particularly the mid-war stuff. If you're looking at 8th Army or Deutsche Afrika Korps, that's pretty cool. Now, these guys are quite readily available online. Like I said, you can pick up platoon packs fairly easily. And if you're looking at starting a force for Bolt Action or something, just for the range that's available and the fact that you can pick up sort of smaller packs, I would probably in the future stick to Battlefront for what I wanted to do. They also do a very broad range of vehicles. Plastic Soldier Company's tanks are pretty cool, I got to admit, but mixing the pair of them, I'd probably stick to Battlefronts as well. Again, they're slightly bigger. You know, whether or not one of them is the true scale over the other, I'm not going to argue. But for these figures, these slightly chunkier figures, I would go with Battlefront's tanks because they are designed to match with this scale. So that's my thoughts on the subject. So honestly, I never thought I'd be doing a review video, and hopefully this has been sort of interesting or useful to somebody who's looking at getting into these 15mm trips. Ascending order of price, you've got Wargames Factory, then Plastic Soldier, then Battlefront. You do get what you pay for. I think these Germans are pretty cool, but they're a little bit flimsy in some respects. Not a great variety of poses. Plastic Soldier companies do require assembly on these small figures, but you get a decent chunk, like there's 145 figures in that box, as opposed to the 84 in the German box. So, again, the price difference might not be as pronounced there as you think. You might be worth paying that little bit more. And then Battlefront, for the range of figures that are available and the ability to pick up just the ones you need, those platoon blisters can be a pretty good boon. So any questions, guys, feel free, drop them in the comments below. Like I said, this is a little bit different from normal, so if you want to see more of this, or you have any other specific questions, I'd really like to know what you guys would like to hear about. So, as ever, guys, thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.